For centuries, the Galactic Empire had watched over the stars like a sleeping giant, its attention fixed on resource-rich worlds and rebellious colonies, never giving a second thought to the silent, gray corner of the galaxy labeled Sol. It was believed to be a dead system, once home to a species that destroyed itself or never truly evolved past its own gravity. But that belief changed the moment a mining drone, owned by the House of Talaris, vanished without warning near the Orc cloud. Most thought it was just a system glitch, an equipment failure in a forgotten part of the void, but one man didn't. High Admiral Calvaris, a veteran of the Zenthor Rebellion and known for his cold instincts, ordered a full data retrieval from the probe's final transmission. The data was scrambled, incomplete, but it showed something impossible. A ship, moving without any known form of propulsion, surrounded by a heat signature far too advanced for any backwater race. Somewhere in the frozen dark of Sol, something had moved and had noticed the drone. Thousands of light-years away, hidden beneath the dust storms of Mars, a very different reaction was unfolding. Admiral Leona Graves stood at the command platform inside the Mars Defense Bastion, her eyes fixed on the intercepted Imperial signal. The encryption was ancient, but not unfamiliar. Earth had cracked that language long ago, when deep space satellites began picking up strange quantum echoes just beyond Pluto's orbit. For 50 years, humanity had remained silent, building, watching, waiting. The Empire had forgotten Earth, and that forgetfulness had become its greatest weakness. Graves turned to her chief engineer, nodding once. "Begin Protocol Iron Sky," she said calmly, though inside, her chest pounded like thunder. It was time. Far from Earth, on Jupiter's moon Europa, great shipyards buried beneath ice sheets roared to life. Columns of black steel rose from under the surface, revealing vessels with sharp, shark-like designs, coated in stealth alloys and powered by fusion cores that could burn for decades. These ships, known only by code names like Vengeance, Ghostspire, and Wrath of Terra, had been prepared in secret for generations. Humanity had watched the stars, had studied ancient ruins on Mars, and found data fragments that hinted at an empire that once ruled the galaxy. That empire had abandoned Earth, written it off as a failed seed. But the seed had grown in the dark, watered by war, fire, and time. And now it was ready to bloom. The fleet launched without ceremony. No grand speeches, no flashing lights, just silent ignition and departure through quantum slip routes that only Earth had perfected. As the stars shifted above, and the last carrier vanished into the void, Earth itself remained still. Its surface was quiet, its cities shielded and powered down, giving off no signal. Humanity knew that to win a war against an enemy that saw itself as a god, it must first become a myth. Days later, the Imperial Command Council received a strange report from Sector 9, a loss of communication with Aravex Prime, a key fortress world. Ships sent to investigate never returned. Surveillance posts near the edge of the Sol sector began detecting strange distortions in spacetime, sudden energy surges that resembled ancient FTL pulses, but twisted, evolved. One by one, the Empire's forward posts went dark, and whispers began to spread through the Senate. "The Sol system," someone said. "They've awakened." But no one could say who they were. On board the lead human flagship, Vengeance, Admiral Graves stood before her crew, their faces lit by the pale blue glow of tactical displays. She wasn't a hero in shining armor. She was a soldier shaped by loss, by years of silence, by duty that had passed from generation to generation in hidden bunkers and cold underground command rooms. Her voice was steady, calm. "They will call us invaders," she said, "but we are not. We are the forgotten children of their empire, and we have come to collect the debt of history." No one cheered. No one needed to. Every officer, every pilot, every AI-assisted drone understood the weight of those words. Humanity had not survived to serve. They had survived to rise. Back in the heart of the Empire, High Admiral Calvaris studied the reports. The attacks were too clean, too precise. There were no survivors, no signals left behind, just silence and loss. Whoever was doing this understood Imperial technology better than the Empire itself. Some theorized it was a rogue AI. Others blamed the ancient enemy known as the Draxari, thought extinct for centuries. But Calvarus had a different theory. He had seen the symbol left behind in one of the destroyed outposts, a star encircled by 13 bars, the ancient flag of Terra. He closed the report slowly, his mind racing. So, he whispered to himself, they're not dead. He stood, signaling his officers to ready the inner defense fleets. For the first time in decades, the Empire would prepare for war on its own soil. But deep down, Calvarus knew this war would be different. These weren't rebels. These weren't pirates. This was a storm born in the silence of space, sharpened by time and fueled by revenge. And as the stars continued to shift and tremble at the edge of known space, one truth echoed across every system touched by the shadow of the human fleet: they have returned. The skies above Aravex Prime had always glowed a soft violet filled with trade routes, cargo cruisers, and patrol ships flying in perfect rhythm, like blood flowing through the Empire's veins. It was a world built for order, structure, and military power, the Empire's stronghold in Sector 9. Towering spires reached into the clouds, their silver surfaces reflecting the twin suns, while massive orbital rings circled the planet like a crown, armed with railguns, missile turrets, and defense shields considered impenetrable by Imperial standards. The people of Aravex, proud and disciplined, lived without fear, trusting the Empire's strength. But that trust would soon turn to ash. It began without warning. No sirens, no alerts, no visible ships, just silence. Then, without a sound, the orbital defense grid flickered, then shut down completely. Across the planet's command centers, screens went black, lights dimmed, and every artificial intelligence unit stalled at once. General Relcor, head of planetary defense, stood frozen as he watched his systems fail. "Run diagnostics," he shouted, but his voice was drowned by static, and the lights in the war room faded to red. At the same moment, high above, hidden from all sensors, humanity's stealth fleet drifted into striking range. Their ships did not scream or flash, they were like shadows, silent and sharp, coated in adaptive armor that bent light around them. Admiral Leona Graves watched through her visor, her ship gliding just outside the ruined edge of the defense grid. "Begin Phase 1, she ordered, and within seconds, kinetic rods, massive tungsten spears accelerated to incredible speeds, rained from orbit. They struck with no explosions, just force, pure and terrifying, punching through reinforced towers, supply depots, and military stations with the quiet finality of falling stars. There were no warning shots. There were no demands. This was not a negotiation. It was a message. Aravex Prime, for all its size and strength, crumbled in less than 20 minutes. In the skies, the Empire's patrol ships scrambled, but their engines were disabled mid-flight by a series of targeted EMP blast tech developed in Earth's silent labs, designed specifically to blind Imperial vessels without harming civilians. One by one, ships floated dead in orbit, flickering like drifting candles. On the ground, human drop pods landed in waves, slamming into fortified zones with perfect timing. Armored soldiers, each one wrapped in matty black suits, powered by smart alloys and muscle-enhancing exosystems, emerged with rifles that fired not bullets, but condensed plasma needles that cut through armor like cloth. The Imperial soldiers, trained for ground warfare, responded quickly, forming lines and shouting orders, but they were no match. The human soldiers were faster, smarter, and more unpredictable. They didn't march, they moved in waves, used terrain, hacked enemy drones, and took over local comms to feed false orders. General Relcor, watching from the remaining command post, knew they were facing something new, something terrifying. "What species are they?" he asked aloud, his voice tight with disbelief. A junior officer looked at a captured data file showing the enemy symbol, a blue Earth surrounded by a ring of stars. "They call themselves humans," he said. "From the Sol system." Relcor stared in stunned silence. Sol was a forgotten system, written off centuries ago as a failed colonization experiment. Nothing had ever come out of it, and all reports claimed it was uninhabited or useless. And yet, here they were, turning one of the Empire's proudest military worlds into a ghost planet. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Admiral Graves watched the city burn not with fire, but with collapse. Every key structure had been disabled. Every enemy response had been predicted. Drones hovered over critical zones, scanning survivors and uploading data in real time. Graves did not smile. There was no joy in destruction, only necessity. She opened a secure channel to Earth, her voice cold but calm. HFY Prime is neutralized. Civilian casualties, minimal. Resistance broken. Proceeding to next phase. Back on Earth, hidden beneath the Antarctic ice, a council of strategists and historians watched the feed. One of them, an elderly scholar named Dr. Havel, nodded solemnly. "They still don't know why we're doing this," he whispered. "They don't see the full picture." But Graves did. She remembered growing up in the bunkers of the moon, learning about the lost age when Earth discovered ancient ruins buried beneath Martian dust ruins, not made by humans, but left behind by those who came before. From those ruins, humanity learned the truth. Earth had not been alone. It had been abandoned. The Empire had seeded life across thousands of systems, then turned its back when Earth failed to meet its timeline for development. Instead of helping, they erased it from maps and memory. Now, centuries later, Earth had returned not to conquer, but to remind. On HFY Prime, resistance collapsed entirely. Human soldiers moved through the capital without resistance. They didn't loot, didn't destroy more than needed. Instead, they uploaded messages into the planetary network records, evidence, history. Videos of Earth's struggle, its survival, its awakening. Citizens who watched were stunned to see a species so long forgotten had not only survived but surpassed what was once thought impossible. General Relcor was captured in the final hour of the operation, brought before a small command tent, guarded by soldiers who said nothing. Inside, Graves met him not with anger, but with steady eyes. "You thought we were extinct," she said. "But we've been watching, preparing. You turned your back on us. You erased us from your histories. But we kept going." Relcor, bleeding and shaken, looked up. "What do you want?" he asked. "Revenge?" Graves shook her head. "Not revenge. Clarity." She handed him a small data slate containing ancient records, the Empire's own files showing Earth's abandonment, the experiments, the false reports that claimed it had failed. "We want the truth known. The galaxy thinks the Empire is flawless. We're going to show them what it forgot." And with that, Graves turned and walked out, leaving Relcor alone with the weight of history in his hands. As the human fleet regrouped in low orbit, the fires of HFY faded, and the stars above were once again quiet. But this silence was different. It was the silence before something greater. Word had already begun to spread across nearby systems, rumors of a species from the edge of the galaxy that attacked like ghosts and left behind only truth. And in the halls of the Galactic Senate, powerful voices began to tremble, asking the same question: if Earth could do this to HFY. What comes next? News of HFY Prime's fall had spread across the Empire like a crack racing through glass, and by the time it reached Xarnus Gate, the Empire's central military hub near the Inner Ring, panic was already stirring beneath polished uniforms and steel-plated confidence. Xarnus Gate was not just a defense station. It was a fortress city in space, larger than most moons, armed with thousands of warships, drone swarms, orbital mines, and the legendary dreadnoughts built by the Royal Forge Worlds. It was here that High Admiral Calvaris arrived, silent and grim, taking command without speeches or formalities. He knew this enemy was not like the rebels he had crushed before, nor like the pirates that roamed the outer sectors. This enemy struck without warning, vanished like mist, and left only confusion behind. He had seen the recovered footage from HFY, the strange black ships that seemed to ripple through space, the Earth insignia glowing softly on their hulls, the precision of their attack, and it disturbed him in ways no enemy ever had. He ordered the full activation of Xarnus defenses, pulling fleets from nearby sectors, calling in reinforcements, and arming the weapon platforms with enough firepower to level a planet. The Empire would not lose its gate. But while Calvaris prepared for a battle of brute strength, the humans prepared for something else entirely. Hidden in the shadows beyond sensor range, the Vengeance, along with 7 other command ships, observed from a distance. Inside the war room, Admiral Leona Graves studied Xarnus' structure, not as a soldier but as a strategist who understood that no fortress, no matter how strong, was perfect. With every defense turned outward, Xarnus had made one fatal mistake it never imagined an enemy could already be inside. Weeks earlier, a small team of human operatives, disguised as a minor alien trade crew, had docked at a distant cargo bay under false identities, carrying with them dozens of spider-like drones the size of coins. These drones crawled through vents, walls, and power conduits, mapping every wire, every weak point, every encryption key. And now, as Calvarus stood in the command center reviewing fleet positions, those very same drones fed live data to Graves's flagship. The human fleet didn't fire. They didn't move. Instead, they waited. Then came the signal. From a satellite station 3 clicks below the main control ring, a pulse was sent, a quantum code known only to Earth's most advanced AI units. It traveled through the system like a ghost, slipping past firewalls, opening doors, shutting down sensors, and, most importantly, waking up a virus that had been silently installed in the gate's central AI weeks before. Within seconds, chaos erupted inside Xarnus. Screens blinked off, drones turned on their handlers, navigation systems froze, and false alarms triggered mass confusion. Ships collided in the docking bays as guidance systems failed. The main targeting array, once capable of tracking entire fleets, now showed nothing but static. From the bridge, Calvarus shouted orders, trying to restore order, but it was already too late. That was when humanity struck. With precision timing, the fleet emerged from Cloak just inside the outer defense perimeter, close enough to bypass the mines and long-range cannons. They did not approach like a swarm, but like a spear, fast and direct, punching through the weak points identified weeks before. Instead of engaging in long-range bombardment, they used gravitational disruptors to destabilize Xarnus' orbit for a few seconds, forcing the entire station to shift slightly just enough to unbalance the weapons grid. Human boarding crafts, sleek and shaped like daggers, rammed into docking arms and airlocks, releasing elite squads who moved through the corridors like shadows. They didn't fire recklessly. They targeted communication hubs, shield controls, and engine rooms, disabling rather than destroying. Inside the central control tower, Calvarus realized the truth. This wasn't just an attack. It was a takeover. They weren't here to destroy the gate. They wanted it intact. As alarms echoed and gunfire crackled through the lower decks, he armed a self-destruct sequence, determined not to let the station fall into enemy hands. But before his hand could reach the final control, a voice echoed from behind a human voice, calm and clear. "It's over, Admiral." Calvarus turned to see a human soldier, armor scarred and visor glowing. He was flanked by 2 others, weapons raised but not firing. The Admiral stared in disbelief. "You made it through all this just to spare us?" The soldier stepped forward. "We made it through because we knew what you would do. You think this is a war. For us, it's a rescue operation for truth, for justice, for history." Meanwhile, across the Empire, a new message was being broadcast on old channels long thought dead. It was Graves, standing in front of the Terran flag, her voice steady. She spoke not just to the military, but to the people of every world under Imperial rule. She revealed ancient files recovered from forgotten satellites, evidence of Earth's erasure from the Empire's records, of early contact missions that were abandoned when Earth didn't evolve fast enough, of lies that shaped the Empire's belief that it was alone at the top. She spoke of humanity's long climb from darkness, its wars, its unity, and its decision to act not as conquerors, but as the mirror the Empire had avoided for too long. On Xarnus Gate, Calvarus stood in silence, no longer seeing an enemy before him, but a people who had forced the galaxy to remember what had been buried. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. The soldier lowered his weapon. "Now you listen." And as the Earth fleet secured the station, uploading files and stabilizing power systems, the Empire's greatest stronghold became something new, not a weapon, but a beacon. From its towers, messages were sent across sectors, calling on those who had been silenced, those who had been ignored, to come forward. The siege of Zarnus Gate had lasted less than 2 hours, yet its impact shook the stars. It wasn't just the fall of a station, it was the fall of certainty. Across thousands of systems, civilians and soldiers alike began to question what else the Empire had hidden, and for the first time in generations, fear crept not into the hearts of the rebels, but into the rulers. Humanity had not just breached the gates. They had opened them, and behind those gates was a truth that could no longer be denied. The fall of Zarnus Gate did more than shift the balance of power. It shattered the illusion that the Galactic Empire was unbreakable. Across distant systems, governors went silent, commanders paused their patrols, and common citizens began whispering questions once considered dangerous. Who were these humans really? How had they remained hidden for so long? And most of all, why had the Empire never spoken of Earth? But while the galaxy trembled under the weight of these new questions, humanity's next move was already in motion. Deep within the Vengeance's data core, Admiral Leona Graves studied a single name pulled from a decoded Imperial archive, Veritas Zero, an ancient outpost listed as a historical quarantine zone, sealed off thousands of years ago, forbidden to all travel under the Empire's highest security protocol. According to Lost Terran research, Veritas Zero was not a quarantine site at all, but the location of the Founder's Vault, a place rumored to hold the true origins of the Empire, before it became an empire at all. Graves knew if they wanted to break the Empire's hold on the galaxy, they needed more than weapons. They needed the truth, and the truth was buried there. The journey to Veritas Zero took the fleet through dead zones where stars no longer burned and where ancient ships floated in silence, untouched by time. No maps showed the path, only fragments recovered from Martian ruins and decoded with Terran AI. The closer they got, the stranger the signals became, whispers in forgotten frequencies, echoes of languages long extinct, and warnings from systems no longer alive. When they finally reached the edge of the Veritas system, what they saw chilled them. A giant ring, larger than any known space station, surrounded by hundreds of derelict ships locked in orbit as if frozen mid-battle. The ring pulsed with low energy, and its surface was covered in strange runes no human had ever seen before. It wasn't built by the Empire, it was older, smoother, alien. They found no signs of life, no defense systems, just silence and the quiet hum of something ancient still working deep inside. A boarding team was formed, including scientists, engineers, and a small group of elite soldiers. Graves led the mission herself. As they stepped onto the surface of the ring, gravity adjusted without machinery, responding as if it recognized their presence. Inside, the halls glowed softly with blue light. It didn't feel like a station, it felt like something alive. As they moved deeper, holograms flickered to life, showing images from a time before the Empire. A time when dozens of species, including humans, had stood together under a council called the Founders' Circle. The Founders had not ruled with force, but with knowledge, guiding civilizations gently through the stars. Earth had been one of the first selected not for power, but for potential. But something had changed. A civil war within the Circle broke out when certain species, led by those who would later form the Empire, decided that growth was too slow, that control was better than guidance. The war ended with the destruction of the Circle, the rise of the Empire, and the erasure of every world that stood against them, Earth included. Records showed that the Empire didn't forget. Earth, they chose to erase it, branding it a failed experiment because it refused to join the new order. Humanity, stubborn and slow by their standards, was declared irrelevant and abandoned. But what the Empire didn't know was that the vault held more than history, it held proof. As Graves and her team reached the central chamber, they discovered a massive crystal archive, still intact, containing voice logs, star maps, biological data, and the signatures of the original founders, including the human delegates. It was irrefutable evidence that Earth had once stood at the heart of a peaceful alliance, and that the Empire was built on betrayal and blood. But something else was there, too, something not just historical, but functional. Beneath the archive was a chamber housing a ship, unlike anything Graves had ever seen. It was small, smooth, and glowing with dormant energy. The AI called it a key ship, a vessel designed to awaken old systems buried across the galaxy, systems that could broadcast the truth across every Empire-controlled planet in an instant. But activating it came with risk. The keyship's awakening would alert the Imperial Core, and their response would be immediate. Still, Graves knew this was what they had come for. As her engineers worked to bring the keyship online, alarms began to blare, movement detected outside the ring. Imperial scouts had arrived, drawn by the same signals humanity had followed. Within minutes, destroyers appeared, circling the ring cautiously. They didn't attack immediately. They were unsure, watching, waiting. Graves didn't hesitate. She transmitted a warning. Any interference would be met with force. But the Empire wasn't here just to observe. Their ships began charging weapons, and the boarding team rushed to evacuate. The keyship, now active, hovered gently off the ground, glowing brighter with each passing second. As the first Imperial shots hit the outer structure, Graves ordered the fleet to form a shield wall, buying time. Her voice rang across the comms, "Hold them back. We leave with the truth, or we die with it." The next 10 minutes were a blur of explosions, maneuvers, and desperate calculations. Human fighters flew with impossible speed, dodging plasma bolts and returning fire with rail pulse cannons. The ring itself began to react. Shields long dormant flared to life, pushing Imperial ships back just enough for the keyship to launch. It rose into the void, passing through enemy lines untouched, and disappeared into hyperspace, heading for Earth's command center. On board, the entire Founder's archive pulsed with energy, ready to rewrite the galaxy's story. Back on the Vengeance, Graves watched as the rest of the fleet disengaged and warped out just as the ring began to collapse, its purpose fulfilled. The Empire had failed to stop them, but she knew this wasn't over. They would come harder now, faster, more desperate. But they would be fighting against their own forgotten truth. And that, Graves believed, was a war they could not win. As the stars returned to silence and Veritas Zero drifted into darkness once more, the seeds of a new beginning had already been planted. Across the galaxy, rebels, thinkers, and those long oppressed were receiving fragments of the recovered data, ancient symbols, messages of unity, and the name of a forgotten world once erased from history, Earth. The time had come not just for rebellion, but for reckoning. The Founder's secrets were no longer buried. The truth had a voice again. The stars above the core worlds burned brighter than anywhere else in the galaxy, but now they seemed dimmed by the shadow of something unstoppable truth. For centuries, these glittering planets had been the throne of the Galactic Empire, where emperors sat behind golden walls and made decisions that crushed entire systems with a whisper. Here, the royal bloodlines, council families, and elite legions lived untouched by the struggles of outer sectors. But now, from behind their tall spires and floating palaces, fear had taken root. The keyship, launched from Veritas Zero, had completed its mission weeks earlier, broadcasting the full truth of the Empire's origin to every corner of the galaxy. In refugee camps, factories, battle cruisers, and classrooms, people watched as the past unfolded. Holograms of the Founders' Council, Earth's betrayal, the rise of control over cooperation. Protests began on fringe colonies first, then spread like wildfire. Soldiers refused to fire. Governors were overthrown. Entire fleets sent messages back to the core, declaring independence. But the Empire would not die quietly. They summoned every loyal fleet, every dreadnought. In the center of the capital world, on a moon-sized citadel called Kareth Prime, the Imperial Council gathered in panic. Their secrets had been exposed, their lies unmasked, but they still held power, and they intended to keep it through fire. Their plan was cruel and desperate: activate the Flame Protocol. A last-resort AI weapon hidden beneath the capital world, capable of sending waves of energy through the Empire's ancient star lines, destroying any planet connected to rebellion. But they didn't realize someone else had already reached it. Deep under the Citadel, where only a handful of engineers were allowed, a human strike team had infiltrated the Flame Core. Led by Commander Eric Vale, a former Empire-trained soldier who had defected after learning the truth, the team moved silently through corridors of polished metal and humming walls. Eric knew every corner. They had trained him here. Now, He would use that knowledge to end what the Empire had built. Outside, the battle had begun. Earth's fleet, now joined by dozens of rebel squadrons from other worlds, engaged the Empire's final guard above Kareth Prime. The sky turned into fire. Thousands of ships exchanged blasts in a dance of destruction. The Vengeance, still under Admiral Graves's command, led the charge, focusing not on the planet but on protecting the teams below. Time was short. The Flame AI had been awakened, and the activation sequence had already begun. If they failed, billions would die. Eric's team reached the final chamber, a massive circular room pulsing with red light. At its center hovered the flame core, an orb of living plasma protected by kinetic fields and surrounded by control spires. As they entered, defense drones activated, firing without warning. 2 team members went down instantly. Eric dove behind a pillar, returning fire with calm precision. He wasn't just fighting for Earth, now he was fighting for every voice silenced, every child raised under lies, every planet stripped of hope. One by one, they disabled the spires, rewrote the code, and finally Eric reached the interface. The Flame asked him a question: "Do you wish to destroy the Empire?" And in that moment, Eric made a choice that no weapon could undo. "No," he whispered. "I want to free it." Instead of detonating the star lines, he redirected the energy inward into Kareth Prime itself, not to destroy it, but to shut down every defense system, every AI protocol, every ship linked to the core. Across the battlefield, Imperial ships powered down, confused and exposed. Rebels seized the moment, capturing vessels, disabling dreadnoughts without firing a shot. On the surface, shields collapsed, towers lost power, and for the first time in history, the capital of the Empire stood naked. The Council, watching from their high tower, realized it was over. Some tried to flee, others to surrender. But the people of Kareth Prime had seen the truth. They rose up, not with weapons, but with unity. Civilians stormed palaces. Workers took control of the skyports. And as the last flame of resistance flickered, humanity landed not as conquerors, but as liberators. Admiral Graves, standing on the steps of the Central Citadel, addressed the galaxy one final time. "This is not the end," she said. "This is the beginning. The flame that once burned to keep the truth away now lights the path ahead. We are not your rulers. We are your equals. Together, we will build what the founders dreamed." Across the stars, celebrations broke out. Forgotten worlds lit their skies with signals of freedom. Former enemies shook hands. Borders faded. What rose in the place of the Empire was not another throne, but a council formed by representatives of every world, including Earth. Eric Vale, wounded but alive, stood beside Graves as the Founders' Charter was signed. He didn't need medals. He had seen the real victory, not in battle, but in belief. And far above, in the orbit of a now free world, the Vengeance remained a symbol not of war, but of will. The war was over. The Empire had fallen. And in its place burned a new flame not of destruction, but of hope.